My name is Ross Anderson. I'm the director of the Faith After Mormonism ministry, and we're so glad that you've logged on to be part of this event with us. Thank you so much for taking time tonight to join us. Let me let you know what is the goal of our event. The goal of our ministry, Faith After Mormonism, is really to help people find encouragement and insight as they navigate what can be a really difficult journey sometimes from being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints into a whole new kind of faith in Jesus and a whole new kind of a relationship with Him. And so that's why we do Faith After Mormonism website. That's why we do this conference, to give you encouragement and insight for the journey. And tonight, especially, and tomorrow, we're focusing on the roots that we need in this journey. I'll talk about that a little bit more later on tonight. We're focusing on some of the key roots that help us get a stable place in this journey. Sometimes we feel uprooted or feel rootless on our journey toward a new kind of faith. Now, who this is for tonight is, if you're watching, hopefully you're one of these people in this group, the whole spectrum of anybody who is just beginning a transition or thinking about a transition out of the Mormon faith and the Mormon culture, all the way over on the other end of the spectrum to people who maybe have been former Mormons, but they have been out of the church for a long, long time. And there's so many different places along the way. And so wherever you're at in the journey, we have some things for you that I think will speak to you in the course of this event that will speak to wherever you're at. We try to understand the issues that people are facing. Our presenters, by and large, are former Mormons themselves. And so we're trying to understand what those issues are and how to help address them, how to give you some hope for the future. And also, there's another group that we want to speak to tonight, and that is if maybe you never were LDS, but you're someone who is maybe mentoring someone on that journey, or you're encouraging someone on that journey. Maybe you're a pastor or a small group leader, Sunday school leader, or even just a friend. And so we want to help you to understand tonight some things about the journey that your friend is on. We're going to begin with our first session tonight from Scott McKinney. Scott lives some ways away from here, and so he pre-recorded his talk. There'll be 2 talks that are pre-recorded this weekend. And Scott is going to explore with us a biblical story, a fascinating story about someone who is isolated and shunned by the faith community that she grew up in. Now that might resonate with some of you. And really the point of the story is how she had an encounter with Jesus and how that changed her life. So Pastor Scott has been the pastor at Centerpoint Church in Orem since 1989. And in that time, Centerpoint has really been a pioneer in what it means to be a church that understands and is welcoming to people coming from an LDS background. So he's been in Utah a long time. He really gets this. He really understands his culture. And so he's going to share with you about an encounter with Jesus.
I'm a pastor of a church that has been in existence since 1945, and it was made up of people that moved to Utah Valley in order to work at Geneva Steel at the end of World War II. When I got here in 1989, our church was filled with people that were from someplace else. They got here and they were overwhelmed by the dominance of the LDS faith in this valley. And then they built a church that became a fortress for people that were not from here. Our desire in coming to pastor at this church that is today known as Centerpoint was to reach the people of Utah Valley, people that live their lives at the center point of LDS culture. In 1989, almost no one in our church was from an LDS background. And the idea of building a church that existed to reach the people of Utah seemed to be far-fetched. But today, the majority of people in our church are from an LDS background, and that is so different than what it was back in 89, 31 years ago. Because at that time, hardly anybody seemed to be leaving the LDS church, and today it is a rather common experience. We are seeing a steady stream of people that are coming into our lives and letting us know that they no longer believe in the LDS church. And sometimes those people are faithful, temple recommend holding members of the church, but they hold within themselves not only deep doubts about the faith. They simply no longer believe it. But they have kept all of those doubts, all of those questions, that disbelief to themselves because of the way the church is intertwined with people's lives, their families, their businesses, their employment. And for them, leaving the LDS church feels almost impossible. Others have come to us and they've let us know that they are leaving and they have left and they are quite open about it. There are all sorts of people that are in the middle. What none of these people seem to be interested in or looking for is organized religion. At the same time, because of their background in the LDS church, former Mormons have been exposed to Jesus and they have read the stories of Jesus in the Gospels. And I will meet former Mormons that describe themselves as atheist or agnostic, and they still have this affection for the person of Jesus. And that is one of the great things about being the pastor here at Centerpoint Church, is that we're all about Jesus. We have a message that is simple and it resonates with people. It is that Jesus is enough. Back in 1989, before becoming the pastor of this church, a pastor of a church that exists to reach the people of this valley, we asked a simple question. What would Jesus do? If Jesus lived in a place like this, how would Jesus respond? We live in a place dominated by a single religion that has very different foundations, different beliefs, different gospels than we have. Mormonism is in many ways the competition. And our church exists at the center point of that competition. So what would Jesus do? How would he deal with the religious competition? What would Jesus do in Utah? And if you read the Gospels, you will see that Jesus was confronted by a situation very similar to the one that we face. Jesus was a Jew, and alongside the Jews, there was a distinct religious culture, a people that looked a lot like the Jews, acted a lot like them, had similar morals, and yet these people claimed to be the one true faith. They were the Samaritans. Samaritans were the competition. Historically, Jews and Samaritans hated one another. They had rival priesthoods. Each had their own competing places of worship. Each had their own versions of the Torah. Both claimed to have the truth. And there had been centuries and centuries of competition between the Samaritans and the Jews. And as Jesus interacted with the Samaritans, he lived out a situation similar to the one we deal with every day. So we have an analogy. Mormons are to us what Samaritans were to Jews. And over the last 30 years, I can tell you the way that we have dealt with our neighbors has been shaped by a series of passages where Jesus interacts with Samaritans. How would Jesus deal with Mormons? How would he approach the religious competition? In Acts 1:8, before Jesus leaves this earth, I think it is important to see that as he issues his great commission to the church, he says, "You'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth." Now we get the Jerusalem and Judea part. Go to your own people, he tells the church. We even get the to the ends of the earth part. That is the Great Commission, to go to the whole world, because God loves the whole world. But in between, he says, I want you to go to Samaria. I want you to go to the competition. How does Jesus go to the religious competition? Well, he didn't just tell them to go. He showed them what it looks like to go. And in John 4, Jesus actually goes to Samaria. We want to know what Jesus would do if he were to go to Utah. I believe that this passage in John 4 gives us clear ideas about what that looks like. And this passage has animated the activity of our church over the last 30 years. Let's start with John 4:4. Now he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about the 6th hour. Jesus is on his way from Judea to Galilee, and it says that he had to go through Samaria. There were other ways of going from Judea to Galilee that did not involve going through Samaria. Jews had all sorts of different ways of avoiding Samaritans, but Jesus goes through Samaria. Jesus shows up in Samaria on purpose. And that's the first thing we can say about Jesus. Jesus shows up. He would show up in Utah. And he shows up here in this passage at Jacob's Well. It is named Jacob's Well for a very important reason. Jacob was the one who built it. And Jacob, his other name is Israel. And he's the father of the nation. Jacob had dug this well about 2,000 years before Jesus. And Samaritans believed that the fact that they owned this well was just another evidence that they had the truth and that they were truly God's chosen people. This well was at the center point of Samaritan life. It had spiritual significance, but it also had a very real experience. It had a very real place in their lives. Every day, Samaritans would come and draw their drinking water from this well. And so, Jesus shows up at this well, and it says that he sits down. Jesus shows up. He not only shows up, he makes himself at home. And, what we tried to do when we moved here 31 years ago, we showed up, we made ourselves at home. And the question that Jesus would have been asked as he sat down by the well, back here in the gospel, is, what are you doing here? Jesus is obviously a Jewish rabbi. And people, Samaritans, would wonder, what are you doing here in this place? When we showed up 31 years ago, people had a very similar question. What are you doing here? And something has changed in time over the years. Utah's become a destination. There are all sorts of good reasons to move here. The mountains, the bike trails, the golf courses, the skiing. But in 1989, not so much. And when we got here, things were different. And the idea that I got from a lot of people was, I thought people like you, Bible-believing Christians, evangelicals, born-agains, I thought people like you didn't like people like us, Latter-day Saints. And I would say, hey, as much as I love the beauty of this place, that's not why we're here. I'm here because Jesus shows up in places like this. And the way that Jesus shows up is through his body, the church. And as a local church, we are here because we believe that Jesus wants our church here at this place at this time. We are here because we believe that Jesus loves the people of this valley. And it says that Jesus shows up at the 6th hour. That's noontime. And that is when a Samaritan woman came to draw water. A woman shows up alone around noon. Most women from that culture would show up at the beginning of the day when it was cool. And they would talk to one another about what was going on in the village. This woman comes at noon because she knows there's a pretty good chance that she will come there and she will be alone. Nobody else will be there. And later on, we learn something about her. We learn that she's been married 5 times and that the man she is living with now is not her husband. She knows that if she goes out at the well at the beginning of the day, she is going to be subjected to judgmental looks and whispers from all the other women. And so she comes at noon because she wants to be alone. Now, this conference is directed towards people that are on a journey out of Mormonism. This woman might be the patron saint of those that no longer feel they belong to the religion they have been raised in. Here she is living at the center point of her faith, and she no longer fits in. She doesn't want to fit. She doesn't want to be seen or be around or talk to anybody. And she realizes that not only will the people in her culture no longer understand who she is and what she's going through, there is a very real fear of being judged. There are times where the isolation of the journey that this woman has made and that so many of you are making causes people to question their sanity. You say things like, well, nobody else seems to be having a problem here. What's wrong with me? Why can't I get it together? The woman's fears were not unfounded. No doubt people had judged her because of her very public marital failings. And no doubt she had been written off. But when Jesus sees her at the well, Jesus reaches out to her. Everybody's written her off but Jesus. And Jesus says to her, "Will you give me a drink?" He does not begin with, "I'm here to save you." Jesus says, "Will you give me a drink?" He builds a bridge. She came to the well because she had a need. She needs water. He comes to the well because he has a need. He is a real human being. He's thirsty. And here's what we cannot miss here. Jesus is real. He's authentic. This is John's gospel. And it begins with a clear statement of who Jesus is. It says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." He was in the beginning. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. Jesus is God the Creator. He could have astounded this woman with his powers. But that's not what Jesus ultimately is doing here. It says in John 1:14 that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. In Jesus, God became a very real human being, subject to all the limitations of our humanity. He got thirsty. He got hungry. He got tired. He got sad. And he went through experiences that made him weep. Jesus not only shows up, he settles down, but he reaches out to her and he keeps it real. He is honest and not afraid to show his weakness. People want to know how you pastor a church in Utah. You show up, you settle down, and you reach out and you keep it real. As Jesus reaches out to this woman, though, he faces a real problem. There is a mountain of religious, cultural, historical baggage that exists between Jesus and this woman. And she states the obvious. She says, "You're a Jew, I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans." She looks at Jesus and she can tell by the way that he is dressed that he is a Jewish rabbi. And she is saying, the last time I checked, my people and your people do not have anything to do with one another. When it says that Jews do not associate with Samaritans, it means they don't drink from the same cup. They've got nothing to do with one another. All over the world, people have put up barriers. My people, your people. My religion, your religion. My race, your race. Jesus does not play by those rules. Jesus answered her and he says this, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water." Here's what a lot of people believe that ministry is all about in a place like this. It's about winning the argument. It's about convincing people that we are right and they are wrong. That is not what Jesus does. Jesus does not compete with the competition. Jesus shows up and he gives her good news. He does not start with what is wrong with the Samaritan religion and the Samaritan people. He tells her about the life that he came to bring and to offer. Jesus knows something about this woman. He knows that she is thirsty for something more than just drinking water. Her soul is dry and thirsty. His ultimate goal with this woman is to see her come to life. We have to be more concerned with people coming to life than with being right. Jesus sees this woman and does not see a Samaritan. He sees a human being. People everywhere, all over the world, have the same need. They want to be loved, and they've got the same problem. They're lost. And part of that lostness is that we get so stuck in the way that we look at the world, our worldview, that we have a hard time recognizing God when he comes to us. And so we see that in this woman. She says, "Sir, you've got nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water?" And Jesus said, "Look, everyone who drinks this water is going to get thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give him will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life." And the woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming up here again to draw water." As hard as Jesus tries to bring her good news, he faces a barrier. Jesus is talking about living water, eternal life. She is talking about drinking water. They have a failure to communicate. They use the same words, and they give those words different definitions. And that, by the way, is something that we face here in Utah. Why can't they communicate? Well, it's possible. She realizes that Jesus is trying to steer things in a spiritual direction, and she wants nothing to do with it. You know, and I think when people leave Mormonism, there is this tendency to go one of two directions. They come to believe that either nothing is true or everything is true. And many have tried the religion thing. They want no more of it. And it's possible that this woman just doesn't want to go there with Jesus. It's also possible that she is so absorbed with survival, with how she is going to make it from day to day, that she can understand what Jesus is trying to say. I have noticed something about former Mormons that will say, though, that, you know, I no longer believe in God, but they know that there is something more to life than just physical survival. And I believe Jesus is trying to tap into that with her. And so how does the good news become real to her? Well, Jesus makes a request of her. He says to her, "Go call your husband and come back." She says, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You're right when you say you have no husband. The fact is you've had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true." Jesus forces her to look at her life, at the reality of her life. Her life is broken, and something in her realizes that this is not the way that it is supposed to be. It is a painful moment, but it is a painfully good moment. There is something in all of us that wants to avoid being found out, but there is also something in all of us that is dying for someone, some place where we can be real. Jesus is saying there is a place where you can get real, where you no longer have to hide. And it is in my presence. And that really is what the local church should be all about. It ought to be a place where people can be real, where they no longer have to hide. And Jesus wants his church to be a place where people can come and find him and be honest about who they are and where they really are in life. Well, the people making this journey out of Mormonism have pretty much had it with organized religion. But there is something about Jesus that draws them. Jesus doesn't love us once we get ourselves cleaned up. It says in Romans 5:8 that while we were yet sinners, Jesus dies for us. He doesn't love the image that we are trying to project to others, that we are trying to create so that we can get people to love us. He loves us as we are, broken life and all. When I meet people on their journey out of the LDS church, sometimes they wonder, why would you ever want to be a pastor in this place? And the reason I have stayed and continue to do what I've been doing for the last 31 years is not so that we can continue to hold religious services and do church. It's this, in those times when I've thought about hanging it up, the thing that has kept me going, the thing I never get tired of, is seeing people come to Jesus and finding life. And I don't care where you go, people are broken. People in this culture are broken by failure, by the expectations of their religion, by their own guilt and shame. And we're drawn, all of us, to Jesus because when you meet him, there is something in us that senses that he can make us whole. It says something about this woman that she does not get offended by him. And by the fact that he has laid the truth of her life out for her to see. She stays around. She asks questions, and the transformational process begins. And the interesting thing is she has truth questions. She says, "Sir, I can see that you're a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped in this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." She may be on the outs with Samaritans and Samaritanism, but she has a worldview that has been shaped by her religion and her culture. She has been raised to think that there are really only 2 questions that matter. First is, who has authority? Who speaks for God? Is it us? Is it our Samaritan fathers? Or is it you Jews? And secondly, where do I find the one true place of worship? Is it on this mountain or is it in Jerusalem, as you Jews say? And the questions that Mormons ask, because of their worldview, they're remarkably similar. First, who has authority? Secondly, where do I find the one true church? And we have to have answers to those questions. And I've taught I've written about the answers that Jesus gives in this passage to her questions. There has been so much that is written where the Mormon faith has been contrasted with biblical Christianity. And this quest for truth is an important, essential endeavor. But the goal is not to just give people answers to their questions. In the end, the goal is that people would meet Jesus, because Jesus is the only one who could bring life out of death. So in the midst of her confusion, this woman makes a statement to Jesus. She says, I know that Messiah, called Christ, is coming, and when he comes, he will explain everything to us. And then Jesus declared, I who speak to you, I the one speaking to you, I am he. See, Jews and Samaritans had this one thing in common. They were both waiting for the Messiah. And I think it's important to see here that when Jesus says, I, the one who am speaking to you, I am he, she does not say, yeah, right. No way. She leaves her water jar and at the well there, and she heads back into town and says to the people there, come see a man. Come see a man that told me everything that I did. Jesus is believable. So believable that she ends up leaving the water jar behind. She forgets why she came to the well in the first place, and she heads back into town and says, come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Look at what's happened here. The woman has gone to the well in the middle of the day in order to avoid people. Now she goes back into town, and she is willing to tell anybody that she sees to come and see a man. She's been disappointed in her life by many men, but now she has met a man that is different. Jesus is so different that she actually asked the question, could this be the Messiah? They all knew this woman and her public failings, and they wonder what has happened to her at that well that would give her the courage to come and tell them about the man that she has met there. And it says, they came out of the town and made their way toward him. The name of this conference is Faith After Mormonism. What does that look like? Well, it looks like this. It looks like this woman. After Samaritanism, she has met a man. She's met Jesus. And the cool thing is it does not end there. After meeting Jesus, she gets involved in the most important work that you could ever be involved in. It is not a commitment to a new religion. No, it is a commitment to that man, Jesus. And she starts bringing people to Jesus. And that, by the way, is the work of this thing called the church. She says, come see a man. And as a result of her witness, people start making their way towards Jesus. And I've seen that happen in a lot of people's lives. After Mormonism, they find Jesus, they meet Jesus, and they get involved in the great work of helping people find their way towards him. My prayer is that this conference would be an important, it would be maybe a stepping stone in that journey that you are making towards Jesus. Because after religion, there's Jesus. And in Jesus, there's life and wholeness and purpose. And my prayer is that you would find that. Would you pray with me? Lord, thank you for this opportunity to look at your word, and I pray, God, that your word would go out and, Lord, that it would bring life, that it would convict, and, Lord, that it would cause us to see our need of you, and, Lord, that people would make their way towards Jesus as a result, and, Lord, that because of it, lives would be changed, and we do ask this in Jesus' name.
Hope you enjoyed that. My name is Jason Barbieri, and I'm a friend here of Faith After Mormonism, and so my heart and goal here is just to kind of be able to be kind of the moderator of the question and answer time. So with me is Ross.
Yeah, and if you tuned in late, I introduced myself earlier. I'm Ross Anderson. I'm the director of Faith After Mormonism. And I'm sitting in for Scott McKinney because he couldn't make it up here from his home tonight. And so between us, we're going to try to answer any questions that you might have about what you just heard Scott share from John chapter 4.
Yeah, and so just to kind of reiterate on that, this would be a great time if you've got a question to throw it on that chat. That way we can try to answer it even here live and on the air here. So don't hesitate to throw questions on that chat for us. So, but I'll start with one that I was thinking of as I was watching Scott there. He talked about Jesus not coming, as an authoritarian to the woman at the well, but almost coming in weakness, right?
Right.
Coming in kind of this spirit. So for someone out there who is LDS or ex-LDS, Ross, is that going to be hard for them to take and to kind of go to a Jesus that would not come authoritarian style, but would just come in weakness? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question because, in our LDS culture, I grew up LDS, and, we're used to a hierarchy of authority, and we have, as LDS people, we really respected that authority, and, and the aura that surrounded the apostles and the leaders and so forth. But here's the difference. This woman is already kind of figured out that she doesn't fit. She's already there's already a tension between her and her community. She hasn't lived up to their standards of worthiness. And so when Jesus comes in that role, he's just saying, hey, look, I'm going to meet you right where you're at. And so a person who's already feeling, maybe even if they're active, even if they're really engaged in the activities of the church, if they have an inner sense that they're not measuring up, and that somehow, I'm not measuring up the way that brother so-and-so or sister so-and-so, if she does this, this, and this, and this, and all these things, and she bakes, and she does, and the list is in. If you already feel like in your heart you're not measuring up, you might not be showing that on the outside. But then someone comes and says, you know what, I'm going to engage you just the way you are. I'm going to engage you even though you came to the well in the middle of the day, Yeah,
and that's a huge deal, right? Not coming to just smack you upside the head and tell you to get in line, but just to come and say, hey, I got you.
Yeah.
I want to know you as you are.
She didn't have to be convinced that there were challenges and problems in her life and stuff like that, And so if somebody came like a religious authority, a Pharisee or whatever, the Pharisee would never have come there, by the way. Never would even enter her sphere in the first place. Yeah. Like Jesus sat down and he asked for a drink, and but the Pharisee would not have anything to do with her, and she would have felt like, well, that's what I deserve. Wow. Jesus came and said, hey, no, you're a person of value, a person of worth.
Yeah. So here's a question we'll take from the chat. They say, hey, Jason, this is Daniel. He says, hey, Jason Ross, here's a question. What do you think of Scott boiling down this issue to just two big questions? Who has authority, and where can you find the one true church? Have you seen this to be true in the ministries that we're involved with? What would you say?
Yeah, I think it's pretty true. I mean, there's a million side issues. There's a million, questions you can get in a conversation with somebody about, and everybody's got their own things they're trying to solve, but those are really both very, very fundamental to the whole conversation. Who has authority? What's the one true church? And here's the thing, if a person's already leaving LDS church for whatever reason, so there's a million reasons why people disengage, right? But if they're already disengaging from the LDS culture, then they've been taught their whole life growing up, there's only one true church. There's only one source of authority. Then where do you go? Right. And so that's a challenge for the journey. It's like, who do I believe? I'm going to talk about that later tonight. Who can I trust to tell me the truth? And then what's the one true church? And that's a challenging question, because growing up LDS, we thought about church a certain way, as an institutional, hierarchical, structured thing, and the Bible presents church a really different way. And so we're talking about two different things in a way, because the Bible doesn't talk about church necessarily as an institution, but as a family, as a flock, as a body. And so what's the one true church? It's not necessarily equated with an institutional denomination.
Okay. That's super good, super helpful. Here's another one. Ready?
Yeah.
You ready for another? Okay. I think this is a question someone chatted. They said, what did or what does Scott's church do to reach out to the LDS population? You're not Scott.
I'm not
but
Scott.
Can you still give us
yeah,
any
I know
guess
Scott.
on that?
Scott and I have been friends since he's been in Utah. Yeah, we've talked about this a lot, strategic questions.
Yeah.
Number one, the main one thing they do is they make sure that Sunday services, that Sunday's a safe place. So they understand that living in Utah, I know not all of our viewers are from Utah, but living in Utah where we live as a minority in this religious culture, that in this culture, there's an LDS church building everywhere, you know. You don't have to drive very far. Sometimes they're like on the same block and you go like, But they're all there. And so in this culture, people think about faith and think about a relationship with God in terms of church. And so if somebody says, I need God, their impulse is to think, oh, I need to go to church. And so that Sunday service becomes a really important gateway to faith. And this is what they do at Centerpoint Church. They make the Sunday service be a place where people who are searching for the next step or searching for faith, they're thinking, I'm going to go to church. So they want to make sure that Sunday service speaks the language of the people. It talks to them about issues that they're facing and dealing with, but it's also a really safe place. So they never denigrate Mormonism there. They never call out their neighbors. Why would you invite your neighbor into your home and then poke a stick in their eye? You know? And so they want it to be a safe place to say, hey, I'm having a faith awakening here, and the worship is wonderful and the teaching is really good and it's down to earth. And so is this a safe place that I could invite my mom to? And so that's the main thing that they do. They just understand the culture and interact with the culture in ways that are engaging and not demeaning.
Yeah. Makes a ton of sense, right? We got time for probably another question or two?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Yeah, let's keep going. Here's a question that someone asked. They said, the message addressed making yourself at home in a place dominated by a different religion. Making yourself at home in a place that's maybe not, feels like home. So, I think the question this person wants to know is, what does that look like practically to really make yourself at home? Let's say for us here in Utah, trying to minister here, what does it look like to make ourselves at home in a place that's a challenge to do so?
Right. Well, I've talked to Scott about this, so I think I can represent him in a couple of ways.
Yeah.
Number one is he says we're gonna stay here. We're not gonna leave. We're gonna put down roots here, and so that the people around us who we are building relationships with, they know that we're not just gonna book, when it gets hard. Yeah. And so he's lived here all this time. He raised his kids here. His son and his son-in-law are both coaches at high school football, and that's one reason why he's not here tonight. And they're playing each other tonight.
Oh, sweet.
Right? So, but that's the other thing, is making himself at home, is he's involved himself in the community. Yeah. He's coached football at different levels. He's got involved with these kids, love their families. And so as a minority faith in Utah, sometimes it's easy. We just want to stay in the safe bubble. Yeah. We just want to hang around. I like to hang around with you, Jason, all the time.
That's right.
Because, it's affirming. But how do we get out of the bubble and engage the people in real ways, like coaching football or playing softball or, being involved in the community choir or band or whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Do we have time for one more? Mm-hmm. Let's ask this one. I think the idea would be in Utah, in any place where there's an LDS culture, there's bound to be the John 4 women at the well present, but obviously, burned out on the outs, as Scott put it, kind of isolated. Yet they're also thirsty. Right, for God. They're thirsty for real. And I guess my thought would just be how do we identify those people? What are some ways we can spot them and really try to help them? Any thoughts there?
That's a great question. I'm not sure I have a definitive answer to that.
Yeah.
Because in the LDS culture, we're taught to put on an image, to live behind an image. We want people to think that we're worthy. And so to appear like we are. We don't want to. It's a culture of perfectionism that doesn't really make space for vulnerability.
Sure.
And so, as long as you're still in the culture, then it may be hard for a neighbor. So, if my neighbor is LDS and we get to know each other, it may be hard for me to see behind the facade of the neighbor.
Right.
So here's what I've noticed over the years, that Christians who are willing to engage their LDS neighbors just on a friendship basis, often become a safe place for them, because they can't tell the people in the ward often if they're struggling with doubts or they're struggling with inadequacy, but they can tell. I've seen it happen over and over again. They can tell a safe Christian person because the word's not going to get back to the bishop or whatever. And so I've got to be willing to be in that relationship long enough and close enough to that eventually they will let me know that is. Now, if they've already moved outside of the Mormon bubble a little bit, I always joke like probably the best place to find them is in a coffee shop. Because the true blue Mormon is not as likely to be.
That's right.
Now, I go to Starbucks and I order tea, but when I was growing up, tea was forbidden by the word of wisdom, but I don't know if it still is. So some of the places that people hang out that aren't necessarily church sanctioned or the kind of places where,
The golf course on a Sunday.
Yeah,
right?
on a Sunday, because it's less likely to be, active LDS people there.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. That's really helpful, man. There's a question here. I think we'll just try to blitz through it. Fred Anson, who's actually going to be one of our presenters tomorrow, says this: Jesus didn't really, the Samaritan heresy that the woman at the well threw at him with any depth. I think he's asking, he didn't really deal with that question of that she threw at him. Was that a fluke, or was that a model for us, that he kind of sidestepped maybe some of the questions that she tried to use?
Right.
Do you think that was just kind of Fred's asking, you think that's a fluke, or was there something behind that you think that Jesus was trying?
Well, he did deal with it. He didn't totally sidestep it, because she said, where's the right place? She raised the issue, where's the right place to worship? And Jesus did answer. He said, you worship here, we worship there. He says, we worship this is legitimate for now. But then he went on to describe how the time is coming when that question is irrelevant. Because those who worship will worship in spirit and truth. So two things going on. Jesus did respond to her question. He didn't argue with her about it. He asserted the truth, but then he moved to her felt need, to her real need. So a lot of times somebody throws up a question. I think what this illustrates, somebody throws up a question to us. It may be a genuine question, or it may be a dodge, okay? I don't know the difference. I can't read anybody's heart. I assume Jesus could read her heart, so I want to answer the question, but I want to realize there's something deeper going on in that person than just the cognitive, than just the intellectual. And eventually I want to get back to what's the real need. The real need is she needed to meet Jesus as the Savior.
Yeah. It's great.
So
that's great. Well, I think that's probably going to do it for our Q&A time for this session. What we're going to do is take a quick break, and then we're going to get to hear from Ross here. He's got a presentation to show right next year.